Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Japanese Tier 8 medium tank, the STA-1. Here it is in all of its glory. So basically this is the first in-game of the post-war Japanese medium tanks that were built. The STA-1 was actually built as a concept tank, an experimental tank if you will, a forerunner to the Type 61, which was to be a Japanese main battle tank that was in service for a few years. But the STA-1 was the precursor to that. And of course this is post-war Japan. The Japanese industry infrastructure has all been severely damaged by the Second World War, and following that the first tanks to be produced by the Japanese after the Second World War were quite heavily influenced by American designs. And you can kind of see that coming through here in the STA-1. Before Tier 8, at Tier 6, Tier 7, etc., the Japanese tanks look much more like this. They're big, slow, sluggish, boxy, with reasonably decent guns. They have a kind of distinctive style. This looks a bit more like a low-profile Pershing, if we're going to be honest. But it has a decidedly Japanese flavour. If you will, as Loki just said, the Pershing sport. But no, so what do you get in game? What do you get with this thing? Well, you have 1450 hit points, which is actually very healthy for a Tier 8 medium tank. What other Tier 8 medium tanks do I have to possibly show you? Well, for example, the Centurion Mark 1 clocks in at the same 1450, and this is a big, chunky vehicle. You've got the Korean Pattern clocks in at 1450. You've got the Super Pershing, which clocks in at slightly more at 1500, but that's the same amount of hit points as an IS-3, just for example. Have I got any other comparisons? Oh, I do have one or two more just to get a feel for things. The Panther 2, well, mine is 1400, but this is the stock turret, so that will probably go up to 1450 with the top turret. And then, of course, you've got the Soviets, the Russians. T-54 first prototype is down at 1300. Object 416, 1100 with the stock turret. So that'll probably go up a little bit with the top turret. But my point is that 1450 is very healthy hit point wise for a Tier 8 medium tank, especially when you consider that, I mean, the STA-1 is not a tiny machine, but it's nowhere near as large as something like the Centurion. It's a 34-ton machine with a 570 horsepower engine, giving you a pretty respectable 16.73 horsepower per ton, and the ground resistances are such that you will feel that engine power. The STA-1 accelerates reasonably well and turns pretty well. In fact, it turns very well. The 45 km/h top speed limit, however, is... well, it's better than the Centurion at 40 km/h. It's comparable to the Pershing. It's not great, but it's good enough to get the job done. I mentioned the traverse speed was very good. This is where things start to feel decidedly Japanese. The armour on this tank is generally pretty terrible. I'll talk more about it in the garage, but what armour the tank does have is essentially on the front of the turret. Everywhere else is paper. I mean, depending on where you shoot, we're talking HE penetration paper. It's really, really thin. I'll talk about the gun in just a moment. View range of 390 meters is pretty nice. Very nice to have a Tier 8 medium tank. And a signal range of 750 meters is very nice, but who's getting excited about that? Let's be honest. So let's talk about the guns. There are 3 guns on this machine, and I'm going to talk about the grind in a moment. Because of the grind, you're going to have to deal with them all. So let's bring them all up and kind of see where we can get with these things. So firstly, we have the 90mm gun M3A1. Now, if that name sounds vaguely familiar, that's because it's basically a Japanese version of the American 90mm gun M3, the weapon you find on the Hellcat, the Jackson, the T-20, a whole bunch of different American machines. If you have a look at it, what you find is that it's 155 pen. Let's just stop there. I mean, it's a 90mm gun, so the 240 Alpha is nothing to be, it doesn't come as a surprise. 2.3 second aim time, tier 8 medium tank, that's pretty much standard. 0.38 dispersion, it's an American 90mm gun, or Japanese in this case. That doesn't come as a surprise, but the 155 pen leaves a little to be desired. That would be fine at tier 6 or tier 7, but here at tier 8 it's looking a little bit weedy. What is nice though, and this continues with these 90mm guns, these are all 90mm guns that this tank gets, is the 8 rounds a minute rate of fire, giving this thing possibly the highest, or certainly one of the highest, oh no, it's not as much as the Object 416, but one of the highest DPM values of any tier 8 medium tank. Now, this gun, it's not, 155mm of penetration isn't quite as terrible as it sounds. You can just about work with it at tier 8, especially because if you need to, you do have a rather punchy APCR round, a premium round to work with. You don't really want to fire many of those because you'll hemorrhage money, but it's enough for you to work with. So, that's the stock gun. You're not going to use that longer than you have to. Let's move on to the next gun, which is basically the same in pretty much every respect, apart from a very small improvement in the dispersion, the accuracy, and the penetration goes up by 30mm. Oh, and the APCR round, sorry, the premium round is gone from APCR to heat, so you now get 275 pen, but it's a heat round, so non-flat surfaces, spaced armor, all of this can give you problems. But we are now at 185mm of penetration. This gun is very similar to the top 90mm gun on the Pershing. Now the Pershing's gun actually received a buff relatively recently, knocking the penetration I think up to 190. But this is a comparable weapon. Again, you can use this to do some grind, to do part of the grind. I'll talk about the grind in a minute again, but not the moneymaker. The moneymaker is this gun. Compared to the previous, slight increase in the dispersion and an increase in the penetration. That's basically what you get with these guns. The accuracy gets better, the penetration gets better. So now this is the top gun. We've got 218mm of penetration. You can see this is called the 90mm gun Type 61. That's because this gun is also used, unsurprisingly, on the Type 61 at tier 9. So 218mm of penetration. It's not quite up there with the Centurion, but it's pretty damn close. It's a good, very good penetration to have on a tier 8 medium tank. And it means that this tank really does not rely on its premium ammunition. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever actually fired a round of premium ammo out, or a round of the heat ammo from this gun, let's put it that way. And still got that 8 rounds a minute, which still gives this tank pretty damn sweet DPM. So this is, all things considered, a pretty nice gun. However, there is a caveat here with this weapon. The dispersion values, and I'm talking in particular when you move the tank, especially if you have the audacity to traverse the hull, are pretty dire. And that means that this gun takes a lot longer to aim than that 2.3 seconds might have you believe. And that can get really rather frustrating. So do bear that in mind. But there we go. It's a pretty decent gun to have on a tier 8 medium tank. Speaking of the grind, as I keep alluding to it, let's actually talk about the grind. Now the grind is, well, it's a mixed bag. This is not the most painful stock grind in the world. However, because this is the first of the Japanese tanks that kind of takes American influence, it means that it shares absolutely no modules with previous machines in the Japanese tech tree, which is a bit of a bummer. Up to tier 7, you know, you've been using these Kawasaki engines, variety of different radios, guns, etc. The STA uses none of them. You've now got a Mitsubishi engine, you've got this Jan GRC4Z radio, etc. So what I'm saying is that the stock grind on the STA-1, regardless of what other grinds you've done, is completely stock. These modules do not carry over from previous machines, not even the heavy line. So, do bear that in mind. Your stock grind will be stock, unless you throw some free XP at the problem. So what order do I recommend you unlocking modules in? Well, module number 1, and this might surprise you, is the turret. Why is module number 1 the turret? Because there is one stat that this does not tell you. I mean, if you compare the two turrets, you might look at them and go, well, I don't really see what you're getting at. The armor is the same, the traverse speed is the same. You get an extra 10 meters of view range. Hoorah! So what are you getting at? Well, numbers don't always tell the whole story. In game, there are a lot of numbers that aren't told, which is a little bit sad, or aren't shown in the garage. The top turret gives you 10 degrees of gun depression, which is really good. The stock turret gives you 7 degrees, which is decidedly mediocre. And the way you play this tank is that you make as much use of its gun depression as you can to hide as much of the machine as you can, because it's made of paper and you don't want to get shot. You use ridge lines wherever possible, and that means that the difference between 7 degrees of gun depression and 10 degrees is colossal. And that means that the first thing you want to do is spend the... how much even is it? Why did I look at the details? 17,000 experience and, well, 32,000 credits, who cares, but 17,000 experience on this turret. That is thing number 1. Thing number 2 is kind of up to you. You want to improve your firepower. I mean, the mobility of the machine is not terrible when it's stock, but you do want to improve the firepower. Now, you can either spend the 19,000... In fact, what I'm going to recommend is that you spend the 19,000 experience on this 90mm rifled gun. Now, considering you have immediate access to this gun, that might seem like a slightly curious choice, but the reason I say that is because 155 pen is kind of painful, which is what you get on the stock gun. The 185 from this middle gun is perfectly usable. And although it adds another 19,000 experience to your grind, it will make the transition to the top gun that bit nicer. And otherwise, you're probably going to fire quite a few rounds of APCR out of the stock gun. So I would recommend getting this gun next. Then concentrate on the mobility. Suspension and the engine are your friends. At some point get the radio, but you probably want to get the top gun before you get the top radio, because this radio still has a 720 meter signal range, so leave the radio for last. So, turret, 90mm rifled gun, suspension and engine, they go hand in hand. Then the Type 91 gun, then the top radio. I mean, you could probably get away without the top radio, to be honest, but it's used again on the Type 61. And again, actually, on the Type 61, you could probably get away without it, because you use a different radio on the STA-1. So actually, if you want to, you could skip the radio altogether. I leave that up to you. But that's the path I would recommend when it comes to upgrading this thing. What about consumables, modules, crew skills, all of that jazz? Well, I've got nothing special for my consumables. I'm not going to be able to show you the module locations for this tank later on, because the websites I usually use are currently bust. But it does maintain the frustrating Japanese tradition of having frontal transmission. I say frustrating because, of course, in World of Tanks, that means if you take a shot in the front, it will knock out your engine, which gets old really quickly. Big fat backside here, very American-esque. I really wouldn't recommend changing out any of these 3 pieces of equipment, of consumables, sorry, unless you were going to go for the large options. I mean, what else could you take in their place? I mean, you could try and take Onigiri to improve your crew skills, but then I can guarantee you will catch fire and you'll be a sad panda. So I would go for either your regular 3 consumables or the large versions of those same consumables. There's not really much point with quality oil either, so that would be my recommendation. Ammo loadout. Honestly, you probably don't need that much HE or that much heat ammo. I just took 5 and 5. I don't think I've ever fired the heat ammo out of this gun. And the HE ammo, I've fired a few times, but it doesn't see that much use. Most of the time you're firing armor piercing. 50 shells is a good number, but the slightly dodgy bloom values on this gun mean that you can miss quite a lot of shots, which can eat into this. So you probably want to take as many AP as you can. I would recommend dropping some of the heat and some of the HE ammo that I've got here. Just to quickly mention, shell costs are 380 credits for 240 alpha damage. It's not too bad. If you can do the job with HE instead, grand, because then your shell cost comes down to 240, of course, and your alpha damage goes up to... what is the alpha damage on the HE shells? 320, of course, which is a bit more respectable. Crew skills. Well, this is a bit of a weird one. So, this thing lives and dies by not getting shot. It doesn't have any armor at all, and so this is one of the few medium tanks where I'd actually recommend camouflage Prioritize camouflage over repairs. I found I was really struggling with this machine until my crew were learning the camouflage skill, and then it all just seemed to get just that little bit easier, and I had a much better time. So I would prioritize Sixth Sense on your commander and camo on everyone else. Now you can see I don't have that. That's because this is the same crew that's been moving up the Japanese tank line, and so they had what they had, and I didn't get camouflage until a little bit later. But I would recommend taking the camo skill as soon as you can, and then you can worry about things like repairs. Snapshot on smooth ride are your friend, because geez, the bloom values on this gun are not very good. Safe storage can also of course be useful. Brothers in Arms sometime later. Camo first, and then some combination of snapshot, smooth ride, and repairs, along with Sixth Sense, and safe storage are probably what you want to prioritize, rather than a probably barely noticeable increase in stats across the board that you would get from Brothers in Arms. What about equipment? Well, I'm not going to say anything particularly surprising here. 1. Vertical stabilizer. You can mount a vertical stabilizer, you should mount a vertical stabilizer. That's generally speaking the rule of thumb with World of Tanks. 2. The second rule of thumb. If you can mount a gun rammer, you mount a gun rammer, because 10% more DPM is 10% more DPM, however you look at it. So, vert stab, gun rammer, and then it's entirely up to you. If you have really good crew skills, including some of the vision skills, recon, situational awareness, and if you're running on a giddy, even though I don't necessarily recommend it, then you might want to look at taking improved vents. If you really can't stand the aiming time on the gun, maybe an enhanced gun laying drive, but frankly, if you're going to do that, the vents are probably a better choice all round. But my pick for the third equipment slot is coated optics, to make the most of that 390 meter view range, and to make you as useful in a tier 10 game as you possibly can. If you can spot, great. You're going to be moving around a lot, so I would prefer the optics over binos, and the rest of the equipment is a bit poop, so I wouldn't really worry about that. So my recommendation is vert stab, rammer, optics. If you wanted, you could swap out the optics for vents. If the gun stats are really bothering you, you could swap out the optics for an enhanced gun laying drive. But my recommendation would be to have either optics or vents in that third slot. It's kind of up to you. I lean towards optics, but that's your choice to make. Is there anything else to say about this machine? Of course, it gets 10 degrees of gun depression, as I mentioned earlier on, providing that you use the top turret, which is why you want to prioritize that top turret, and that kind of dictates how you want to be using this tank. Very much the Ridgeline Warrior, as you're going to see in the replays. Before we get onto the replays, though, let's give you a quick look at some of the armor profile. That's the word I was looking for. Or what little armor there is on this thing. Time to talk about the armor then. I mean, there is no armor to speak of on the sides or rear of this tank. In fact, if you get rear shots and you have it loaded, pretty much any caliber high explosive will go through the rear of this tank. From the front, however, well, the frontal hull is trash. It's 45mm, even with a bit of sloping, it's never going to amount to much. I mean, you could put a load of angling on this. You're only ever really going to bounce things at an auto bounce angle. The turret is a little bit mixed, I guess. So you've got, let's see if we can have a proper look at this turret. You've got this commander's hatch poking out the top, which is a bit of a problem, because whenever you try and use your gun depression and go hold down and all this jazz, this thing is going to poke over the top of the ridge line long before anyone sees your tank, and it's made of cheese. So this is a big obvious spot that they can shoot you. Your turret is not to be relied upon. I mean, 86, 50, 58, but there are regions that can get bounces. You have several layers of spaced armor on the gun mantler in places, for example. And so, situationally, you can bounce things. Now, large stretches of this gun mantler are also pretty easy to penetrate. This is not a Pershing, it is not a T-32, certainly. It shouldn't be relied upon, it's not even a Centurion, but you can get bounces from this gun mantler, especially if you're using this gun depression, and yeah, you can get bounces, but this is not a tank that is designed to bounce anything, it is designed to not get shot. But just wanted to point out that you can get some bounces from the front of the turret here or there. Everything else, the only way you're going to bounce things is through an auto bounce angle. Will quickly mention that it's probably not worth trying out side scraping with this machine because this section. It is 35mm thick and it is poking out of the side of the tank, so if you try side scraping, that thing is in the way. If you try side scraping, you have to be very careful with the side armour of this tank. It is 35mm thick, it does not take much to overmatch it. Your standard 105 guns that you get a lot of at tier 9 and 10 from medium tanks will do the job. So yeah, really you want to concentrate on not getting shot in this machine. Here we have the first replay then. As per usual, we are top tier in this game, and we're here on Fisherman's Village? Fisherman's Bay? I can't remember what it's called. Fisherman's Bay. There we go. And at the time when I played this, I was doing the incinerator mission for the T-55A. Now, that's not going to be relevant throughout the course of this game. But when I say I was doing it, I wasn't specifically doing the incinerator mission. I just had the incinerator mission selected. I was also trying to chase the Ace Tanker award in this machine, which I have subsequently got, but it's not going to be this game. Anyway, as you may hopefully have gathered, I don't really tend to show Ace Tanker games in reviews. I don't think it's necessarily that helpful. But regardless, we're here on Fisherman's Bay. STA-1 has good gun depression, has a pretty decent gun, and in this matchup the gun is rather nice. And among the tier 8 medium tanks, it has pretty good DPM. Now that does not mean it has pretty good DPM full stop, it just has pretty good DPM for a tier 8 medium tank, which as a class is a bunch of vehicles with pretty shoddy DPM, generally speaking. Trying to come over to this central ridge line in the first instance, we're trying to get some spots, use our gun depression, shoot some people that we can, and we've already put one shot into that poor ELC there. You can see, if you look at the team composition, that the enemy team have most of the heavy tanks, so it is entirely possible that we will lose the town. If you look at what we've got in the town, we've got a T-34, which is a tier 8 heavy tank, but fighting in a town is not really its natural environment. And then we have a series of lower tier medium tanks, KV-13, or 2 KV-13s, a Type 58 and a T-34-85. So losing the town is a distinct possibility. But more on that later. We're just trying to, as I say, patrol the central region. Sorry about that. Patrol the central region of this map and try and spot people, get shots on people without overexposing ourselves, because you never want to overexpose yourself. The police get in touch with you and want to have a little word. Now you can see we've already lost a KV-13 and a Type 58 from the town. The enemy have an IS-6 in the town itself. They have an IS pushing through these houses just to the side of the town. There's a T-34-85 in the background. There's a T-150 in the background there. There's that we know of. There's potentially other things too. And the IS-6, the IS, etc., they're all far better equipped to deal with a town fight than the T-34. And we managed to put one shot there into the IS if he's not going to be cautious, and it looks like he's not going to be cautious. We could have got another shot into him, but he pulled behind a building just in time, so But looks like another shot is on the cards. Take the shot blind. Nah, we didn't hit him. And again, the IS is behind yet another building. But if he's going to keep pushing, we should hopefully get flanking shots into him. Oh, and we're starting to take fire from that T-34-85. But, you know, I have a bigger gun than you do. I hit harder than you do. And there's that Commander's Cupola coming into play. I couldn't shoot him, but because I have that nice Commander's Tower sticking out the top of my turret, he could definitely shoot me. IS-6, put a shot in, and this is where you can see what I'm talking about with the DPM on tier 8 medium tanks. 240 alpha damage against tier 8s is not that much. And the reload on the machines is not, generally speaking, good enough to offset the kind of weedy damage output. Anyway, trying to do something about this KV-4, who's decided to just drive across the centre of the field. We actually bounced a shot off of his rear there, which was a bit unfortunate. But pouring fire into him, not staying still, because although he's not going to put fire into me, if I were to stay still I just make myself a very obvious artillery target. Take a shot from behind from that T-34-85, and now I pull back behind this ridgeline so that I can use this ridgeline along with my gun depression to get shots on these guys while exposing as little of my tank as possible. Dickermax nails the T-34-85, and as predicted, the town has basically been lost. Everyone except the T-34 who went into the town is dead, and there's a series of Soviet heavy tanks and also an ISU-152 coming out of the town to make our lives difficult. But take advantage of the situation to put a shot into that Tiger 1, who is on low health. Our T-34 is not long for this world. He's pretty much guaranteed to die. And there we go, he is done. So if these guys have any sense, they'll go back to their own base. If they don't, they'll push toward ours. Now, why do I say if they have any sense they'll head back to their own base? Because we have encroached far further, or far closer to their base than they have to ours. So we will win a capping war. Most likely. But, you know, there's no accounting for stupid. So, T-150 is happily pushing out, and we take that shot. And you can see, 240 alpha damage. It doesn't look like a lot against Tier 8 machines, but against Tier 6, yeah, that's a lot of damage. Anyway. Using this ridgeline to spot this T-150 and the IS-6 if he makes an appearance, and of course to put shots into them. GW Panther is perhaps a little far forward. He should probably have been using this time to retreat into kind of the A1, A2 sort of region. But as it is at the moment, defending the cap circle, we have myself, GW Panther, Dickermax, and there's also an E25 and a Ferdinand on that central ridgeline, if you will, who could turn around and pour fire toward those Soviet tanks if necessary. The ISU-152 has headed back toward the enemy base and is defending it, along with the 112, the Lerva, and their GW Panther that we're aware of. And as far as we know, the T-150 and the IS-6 are pushing toward our base. Now, haven't managed to spot these guys just yet. Oh, there's the T-150. 411 health, Ferdinand executes him. That just leaves the IS-6. Now, I have most of my health left. I could go and just try and batter the IS-6 down, but why would I? He will penetrate me far easier. As it is, he's not even there. He has actually gone back to defend the base. He will penetrate me far more easily than I will penetrate him. You know, he has... As it is, he doesn't have a huge amount of health, so I probably could do that, but I'd lose a lot of health in the process. You know, try and conserve your own HP where you can. That doesn't mean sit on the red line and camp, of course, but try and conserve your health where you can. ISU-152 away there in the distance. He dies before my shell lands. What are you going to do? So, seeing if I can use this bush to spot anyone from, I do of course have coated optics, so that buffs my view range up a bit, but no dice by the look of it. Oh wait, there we go. IS-6, Slurver, and the 112. Now I should probably actually have pulled back from the bush before taking that shot, but there we go. 112, managed to put a shot into him. Don't really want to take return fire from that guy, although, oh, it turns out he's looking at someone else. Going for those frontal shots, because that's where the 112's fuel tank is located. And because I can also get tracking shots like that, I take a round from him, but the E25 polishes him off, and then just leaves the IS-6, the Lerva, and the GW Panther. Again, seeing if I can spot these guys. Who is around? Nope, no joy. Alright, well our E25 is moving up. E25 has all of his health still, so he can survive a shot or two. There's the IS-6. Looks like the artillery blind-fired my bush, which was a bit sad. Well played to him. He takes up my tracks and shaves off more of my health, which is kind of annoying. And we're just backing off here, and, you know, getting shot by artillery is definitely the game's way of telling you to be somewhere else. So, let's be somewhere else. Shot there was actually quite annoying, because it makes me an almost guaranteed one-shot for the IS-6. And, actually, a a potential one-shot for the Lerva as well. So that's a little awkward and a little annoying. I'm knocking down quite a few walls here, which if the artillery is looking is a bit of a mistake, but there we go. Them's the breaks. Mistakes, I makes them. Trying to spot these guys. If I can spot them, we can shoot them. If we can shoot them, clearly we can kill them, and that'll be good. I mean, we do still need to be a little careful. The tanks we have left don't have a huge amount of health between them. The U-25 is probably the healthiest of the lot of us, and there's the Lerva. Mr. Lerva. He, however, is hunkering down behind a rock, which is kind of sad. But other people have shots on him, so he shouldn't be too long for this world. Seeing if I can sneak in a shot into the rear there. I can indeed. One more shot will finish this guy off. Can we get it? Can we get it? Can we get it? No. IS-6 is now spotted. Let's prioritise him. I have nice big shots into his side. There's one. And he should probably be doing something to take some cover. Ah, he pulled forward just as I fired. Lerva is down, and IS-6 pulls behind a rock. So it's just the IS-6 and the GW Panther now. Seeing if I can pick out a shot on this IS-6. Doesn't look like I can. GW Panther. Ooh. Slim shot over the ridgeline there. And we managed to pick him off. And that just leaves this IS-6. We can be a little bit more gung-ho now. Even if I were to die here, it's entirely likely the rest of our team would kill him. But nonetheless, let's not take it for granted. You know, an IS-6 is still a formidable opponent, even when it's not got a lot of health left, especially when it's top tier. But all these guys are descending in, trying to pick up the kill. And the IS-6 is backing off, and kills the AC, and there we go. I managed to pick up the kill on him, and that is the game. So, hopefully that got to show you the kind of... the fact that even when you're top tier, you can't really take hits in this machine. You just don't have the armour to absorb them. You can take a few hits because of your health pool, but that's about it. Anyway, let's go and have a look at the results. So that game ended up being enough for a first class mastery, fire for effect, bruiser, confederate, and high caliber. 3,453 damage done, 3 kills, 1,132 base experience. Finished top of our team. Hurrah. 24 shots fired, 17 hits, 15 penetrations. The accuracy on the gun is not fantastic. Of the damage count, only 1,200 of it was from a distance of more than 300 meters. I was expecting it to be more than that. So more of those shots were at close range than I thought they were. 4 hits received. Our armor did absolutely nothing. That's the sort of thing you can expect from this machine. 1 enemy tank spotted, 10 damaged, 3 destroyed, and 880 odd assistance damage into the bargain, making 11,000 credits. It would have been 27,000 credits with a premium account. So let's go and have a look at the second game where we are bottom tier. Here, of course, is the bottom tier game. So we are here on Siegfried Line. I will remember the name of the map eventually, I promise. And this is, of course, a tier 10 game. As I said, we're bottom tier. This is an assault game, and we are on the defending team. And there's a spot that I quite like to use on this map if I am on the defending team. The caveat is that artillery makes it incrementally worse. Now, there is one artillery piece on the enemy team. It's only, quote-unquote, tier 8, but is perfectly capable of nuking the ever-loving bejesus out of me. But, I'll take the risk with just one artillery, and it's this spot just here. Because you can cover a couple of different... you can basically cover the north, and all the approaches that the enemy team would have from the north toward your base. So, was trying to get a shot there on that M48A1 pattern, wasn't successful. Coming over here to see if that tier 10 waffle thrower or anyone else is going to give me shots at them. There's a T57 heavy, but we go bedoing. Thankfully, however, his 120mm gun doesn't rip our face open. It looks like he's found someone else to play with. Decided better of it, pulled back, and there's an E50. Now I take a hit there, takes out my suspension, repair the suspension with the repair kit, sorry, because I really don't want to sit there and just continually get shot. It looks like that E50 might be using a small gun, like an 88mm gun or something. There's the M48 pattern. Put a shot in. Tried to see if I could track him in place into the bargain. Looks like it might have worked, but I'm not entirely sure. Very cheeky light tank there. Let's see if we can do something about him, and we can, but we take another hit from somewhere for our troubles, and the pattern manages to get away. So far the scorelines are 1-0. They've lost the 1375. We've lost an ISU 152. I guess it was the guy the T57 was letting rip on. M48A1 pattern, he does not want any of that. This is, of course, the old pattern. This is before it was buffed, because this is a patch 9.10 game. So the pattern doesn't have quite the snapshot capability that it gets later on. I take a hit from the CDC, but I managed to put a shot into him as well. So far this is not great, because I'm just trading shot for shot with these guys, and you know, your tier 8, your alpha damage is not fantastic. Can't get a shot on that Jagdpanther 2, backing off because I do not want to eat a 105mm shell from the pattern. That would suck. I mean, I've only got just over 700 of my health remaining, and I haven't actually done that much damage so far. Might have got a bit of assistance damage on that pattern, but yeah, get spotted again. Kind of awkward situation. So, can we get another shot in on that CDC? Does not appear so, but Jagdpanther 2, is the Jagdpanther 2 really going to try and push up? I would love it if he did. There we go, there's the artillery that I have been worried about all game. Thankfully, he didn't manage to nail me there. This is just one of those times when you kind of grit and bear the threat of artillery, because if you just let artillery, in this particular case, dictate where you're going to deploy, then the artillery's kind of done their job. So yeah, now as it turns out, our team goes on a little bit of a murdering spree, and the scoreline is now 6-1. So looks like we might win this, and of course this is assault, which puts all the pressure on the enemy team to come and get us. On the attacking team, I should say, which of course is the enemy team in this particular instance. E50, no, he doesn't want any of that. And tier 10 waffle thrower. No, he's behind a ridge line. There's the tier 9 waffle thrower though. Nah, no dice. Scoreline is 8-2. So far this has been a thoroughly unexciting game, I will be honest. E50 actually has now exposed himself. Of course he has. I've relocated, so don't have shots on him. That's how these things work. But there we go. We managed to put 190mm round into that guy and managed to make him use his premium fire extinguisher. You can tell it's a premium fire extinguisher because he only ticked for, well, he only spent one turn ticking before the fire was put out. We managed to bounce on a CDC, by the way, but if he's just going to sit there, well, we'll take the kill. And manual fire extinguishers, however fast you hit the button, at best they will go for 3 ticks. So we put a shot into that M48 pattern, tracking him in place. Someone else puts a round in, and we're just going to work this guy over, set that guy on fire as well. So if we'd been trying to complete the incinerator mission for either the T50, well, any of the incinerator missions actually, would have just completed it. And pattern is on low health. As just this pattern and the tier 9 waffle thrower. Pattern is down, that just leaves the waffle thrower. There we go, put a shot into him. Now I'm not switching to high explosive here because I would have to actually aim my shot carefully, and I'm not doing that because I don't want to eat a 12.8cm round to the face. And someone picks up the kill, and that is the game. Didn't seem particularly special, but we were just trying to support our team, do what we could, and generally be of assistance. So let's go and see how the results were. So as it turns out, that game was a little better than it felt. It was good enough for a first class mastery, spotter, fire for effect bruiser, and my second mark of excellence with the STA-1. If we actually look at how we got that, well, we picked up some spotting damage, or some assistance damage I should say. We managed to spot the T57 Heavy, who got slapped. We tracked the M48 Pattern, who then got shot, and we got some spotting damage on the Jagdpanther 2 as well, and that all actually added up to quite a respectable amount, as well as doing a bit of our own damage in the process. We were mainly there you know, being damage support, doing what we could, putting shots into flanks, helping where we could. We weren't carrying the game, although having said that, we did finish top of the team. Tier 8 shooting higher tier tanks, what can you say? 1,829 damage, 2 kills, and 1,185 base experience. Where on earth did all that experience come from? Well, some of it came from the fact that we were shooting higher tier tanks. M48 Patton, tier 10, E50, tier 9, Waffle Thrower, tier 9, AMX, tier 8, AMX, 1375, tier 7. But generally speaking, we were shooting higher tier tanks than ourselves, but all of that assistance damage actually came to just under 3,000. 2,876. So sometimes, even though you're not the one you're not actually trying to spot for people per se, you can still actually get yourself a nice amount of assistance damage into the bargain, remembering of course that includes tracking damage. And so despite, well, we fired 15 shots that game, hit 12, actually penetrated 9, so we missed 6 rounds. But the 90mm ammunition on this gun isn't too expensive, so that's not the end of the world. We received 3 hits, of which all penetrated. I mean, that would be unsurprising even in a tier 8 game, which is the best you're going to get, obviously, but in a tier 10 game it comes as absolutely no surprise at all. Spotted 1 enemy tank, damaged 5, destroyed 2, picked up that shed load of assistance damage, and travelled 1.3 kilometers as well. And of course that assistance damage meant that we actually made a profit on that game. We made basically 29,000 credit revenue, take away the costs, 16,000 credit profit, and of course the experience to go with a premium account that would have been basically 31,000 credit profit. So you can certainly make a profit at tier 8. Let's quickly nip back to the garage and then we'll round things off, I guess. So, verdict time. The STA-1. I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this thing. When I was first playing it, I couldn't stand it. The gun aiming stats drove me spare. The lack of armor really annoyed me. And that's because I was trying to play it like a Pershing or a Centurion with the pretty bouncy turret front. And it is not one of those, despite how it appears. You really need to prioritize not getting shot, which with the dodgy bloom values on the gun can actually get kind of annoying, but that's the way this tank works. You peek over ridge lines, you shoot when you can, you abuse your good DPM as much as you can, or good relative to the other tier 8 mediums anyway. You're a support tank. You are not a gung-ho brawler, you are a support tank. Don't rely on any bounces, but, you know, giggle when they do occasionally happen. Once you get used to this machine, it can be a really fun and really rewarding tank to play. But it's not everyone's cup of tea. I am not personally keeping it, although I have had some fun playing it. I'm not personally keeping it. It's just not quite my thing. I would rather play the Centurion personally. Your mileage may vary. If you find the size of the Centurion gets on your nerves, you really wanted something with that little bit more mobility, the STA-1 might be up your street. If you wanted a slightly sneakier Pershing that trades away some of the armor for a punchier gun, the STA-1 might be up your street. It's definitely worth trying. It has its own little niche in the world of kind of gun depression based NATO tier 8 medium tanks. It's a nice little niche and it fulfills that nicely, and it's quite a nice tank to play when you get used to it, although some games you will be cursing and swearing at the gun. But as far as I can work out, that's something you're going to have to get used to. Certainly at tier 10 it's a very similar story. The gun can be annoying. I don't know about tier 9. I've not played them yet, obviously. I haven't bought them yet, but they certainly look like they could be a lot of fun, but the gun on the tier 10 might get aggravating. Anyway, that's my opinion. It's a decent machine to get. A good player will be able to make more use of it than a bad player. That sounds obvious. What I mean is, you don't have any armor, you can't afford to be shot. You rely on your gun depression. So a more experienced player, it's not a beginner-friendly tank, that's what I was trying to say. If you want a beginner-friendly tier 8 medium of this style, something like the Pershing is will probably suit you better, even though the Pershing lacks a little bit of penetration, although it did receive a recent buff. Anyway, I found it quite good fun to play. I'd certainly recommend going and giving it a go. It's different from the previous tanks in the line. that appeals to some people because they didn't like the previous tanks in the line. Part of me goes, well, it's a little bit of a shame because it's... If you compare this to the Tier 7, the Chi-Ri, the Chi-Ri is a lot more distinctive because it's different. I mean, it's different. The way it's different has now been impinged a little bit, actually, with the introduction of some of the Czech tanks, especially the Tier 6, Czechoslovakian tanks. But the Tier 8 is a bit more generic, if that makes sense. But, as I say, it does still fill a niche among the Tier 8 medium tanks. But I'm rambling. It's a decent tank, it's worth giving a go. It's just not quite my cup of tea, and I will be selling it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that review. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.